is a really, really good matchup for the Mage. So maybe he fancied his chance of having one good matchup, maybe not wanting to take his chance against a Brute, just doing the thing it sometimes does. We are going to get a look again, though, at this Rogue deck that I think everyone needs to get used to, Sottle, because we're going to be seeing a lot of this in the next couple of weeks.
It may very well be here to stay, indeed, especially with the way some of the nerfs could be going in the next week or so. We shall see Octobot in the opening hand from jiuqianyu, and this is looking like a pretty solid opener, especially if, well, thank you, especially if he can find a Swindle to go alongside that Foxy Fraud that he also has in the opening hand.
One thing I found very hard with this Rogue deck is I want to proc 7 Octobots. I seem to waste them mercilessly, and you've really got to use them carefully, right? Otherwise, you just don't have enough Octobots to get through the deck.
Oh, yes, indeed. This is the hand already. I was about to say, I think step one for proctoing your first Octo is that you really want to secure the bag with the field contact first, right? So you get that one really effective field contact turn where you make the huge board in the mid game, try and draw 4, 5, 6 cards with it, really start digging through your deck. And then the second Octobot you can be flexible with later, whether you need to shadow step it, whether you need to greed it out. But this is already a lot of cards in hand that are fantastic to be discounted with this Octobot, so I'm sure we'll be seeing it at some time in the near future.
Oh, he trades the fire sale. That's interesting to me. I thought he'd hold on to that. These rogue minions, that big wide board's a little bit scary when it comes down, and you know the fire sale just gets the healing done for you, just gets it all out of the way. But AyRoK not interested in that. He just wants to get on with doing the mage things.
Let's get this out of the way. One time for the Tempo Kings out there. Both of these players do need to calm down, dude, because there's just a little bit too much speed going on right now. This is the first moment of hesitation I think we've seen in the whole series. AyRoK will certainly be riding a wave of adrenaline from the previous season, previous series, sorry, where he did, jump out of his seat when he got that lethal with the aim shot off the top. We've seen the full range of emotions coming out from AyRoK in his time on camera as a competitive player, but I would like just to see him calm down just a little bit, take his time here. I know there's not much to consider in these early game turns with Mage, but let's just take a moment.
Yeah, and I'd noticed the same thing, and he has just come off against a totally different speed player, Judgment, very considered, let's call it. And, that can be a difference. Well, you try to match the speed of your opponent. If your opponent's going very different pace to what they were going in the last game, which was 7 minutes ago, yeah, that's going to be difficult. So like you say, just take a breath. And I think he's mature and professional enough to do that after a moment or two of this.
Really interesting decision on the secret passage there. Was granted the shadow step and chose to take the step on the spell damage as opposed to on the Octobot. Valuing, I think, saying my original hand is cheap enough right now. What I really want is either an additional battle cry or the flexibility for that additional spell damage later on. You can think you have to be too precious with your spell damage with this deck. If you're against a 30 deck, a deck that's not going to gain armor in any way, it generally doesn't matter that much. You'll have enough spell damage to get there in the long run. But I think shadow stepping it there over the Octobot goes to show that he has a pretty clear plan as to what his next turn or two are going to look like.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see just how he gets that done, because his hand is really cheap anyway, I guess. So that makes a lot of sense. Also, while you were giving that information, AyRoK did pick up the Mask of Cthulhu. The reason I'm bringing that up is because that's a full clear against like 5 rogue minions in this deck. Obviously, he's picked it up for the huge amount of damage, but it will have a backup plan available of just clearing the board up if he needs to. He has got the back now as well, of course.
Exactly, yeah. He's refound the fire sale, which is fantastic for him. There's no surprise on his face as you see this turn coming down from jiuqianyu. He's fully expecting to have to deal with it this turn. Even if a Divine Shield were to come down, he knows he has the fire sale and ping to be able to mop it all up, so he should be fairly chill. But the big deal here is not necessarily the board that's being made, it's the amount of cards that are being drawn. It's how thin that remaining card library is getting, already down to 12 cards left in deck. jiuqianyu picked up a fire sale off the Wand Thief with zero intention of casting that card. That is just 1 mana, draw a card if and when he needs it here, because even though it doesn't really thin his deck, it can still help him dig for that crucial card on the turn he needs it, be it an Octobot, be it a field contact, whatever it is he needs on any given turn.
A point of interest to anyone who's thinking of picking up this deck and plays a slightly different list, Fire Sale does ruin your Kazakus when you trade it into your deck.
Yes.
Found that out the hard way earlier today. AyRoK has another problem as well, apart from the thinning deck of his opponent, is that he's got no card draw of his own. He's going to need this Fire Sale to clear up, and he is out of gas completely now.
He is indeed. Just keep a slight eye on the resources on the other side, because that is now 2 Shadow Steps that have been used. Essentially, I was going to say 1 spell damage also used, but that's not technically true because one of the steps was used on that spell damage, so it's still there. There are still the 2 original spell damage minions available, but that's about it at this point for jiuqianyu, so he's going to have to be very careful with how those last couple of spell damage minions are used.
Yeah, because he is going to need to do the absolute maximum.
It's quiet.
This is the all-in version of the deck. Do you prefer this version of the deck, the everything costs 1, or did you like the way that Orange did it with the Kazakus, a little tiny bit of board presence tempo to go with?
I can see the beginning, like the roots of the idea that the version with preps is probably optimal, but much harder to play. That's kind of how I would look at it. So I think most people would have a better win rate initially with either Frozen's list or this list. But when I did try out the Orange list, I think every game that I lost, I could then look at the replay and spot why I lost, and it was my fault and not anyone else's. So I definitely think that is perhaps the version of the deck with the highest upside, but I think it's going to be a lot of time before too many people get to a high level with it.
Good. I like it when people take a while to get to the top level, because then we get to see lots of different games, and mistakes make things exciting as well. Talking of which, exciting, down to 6 cards. It's trying to set up, can he get it done next turn? But he's also thinking, and we've seen him do this earlier in the tournament, he doesn't necessarily need to get it done next turn. He gets it done the turn after. He doesn't have to push the panic button.
Yeah, very true. Throws out the secret passage with no Shadow Steps left. I don't think there was any world where that card was being used for value. He just wanted to clear a space in his hand. With the Penflinger going back in, he now gets to end the turn with 9 cards back in his original hand, which is the ideal. And you would imagine with this field contact for 2 alongside double spell damage, double 0 mana Garrote, and the Prize Plunderer in hand to continue to proc a couple of cards. I believe there's still a Swindle hanging around there as well. Board space is the only concern now for jiuqianyu when it comes to dealing with this, but there are 1 health minions on board that he can continuously ping off himself as he continues to play his own Battlecry minions. So I think this might be a crisp and clean game number 1 going over to the Chinese representative here.
Yeah, no card draw still for AyRoK either, so he really is up against it in terms of getting this done. He's got no damage in hand. Well, I don't count the mask because it's 7. He's not going to get that down anytime soon.
Yep, first flame, goodbye minion. He's going to check for the counterspell as well. Gets the bad news, or gets the good news, I suppose, that counterspell is dealt with. He's not going to get to counterspell the Garrote. That's a nice little pickup and a nice little hold for jiuqianyu as well, because the counterspell was a smart choice. There aren't many spells in the deck for this rogue, so counterspell to try and block one of those Garrotes was actually a pretty nice gambit from AyRoK, but the first flame to be able to break it for 0 mana was beautifully done there for jiuqianyu. And now, as I said, he just has to go through the rigmarole of clearing his own board as he goes along here and maxing out on spell damage before he gets those Garrotes in the deck.
Yeah, this is not D6 Warlock, oddly enough. If you mess this up, you lose the game nearly always. You've used up your spell damage, you urgently need that spell damage. You cannot afford to get an ordering mistake or you are done. Not going to say he's going to make one, but that's why he's taking his time.
Yeah, very nicely sequenced in the end there as well, just picking up the final pieces. Drops the Penflinger. He can now throw out double Garrote with one of them pulling the Penflinger back to his hand. And then now all he needs is to achieve the formality of replaying the Penflinger or the animated broomstick back on the board. That will draw all 6 cards from the deck, each dealing 4 damage for a nice and easy game 1.
Yep, very, very straightforward. Obviously, Helped a little bit by the fact that AyRoK drew really poorly, but it just looks so smooth when he plays this deck. He's obviously put a lot of practice in, just like we talked about with Orange. The difference is we got to talk to Orange. We knew actually for fact that he'd put the time in, but you don't play this deck this cleanly if you haven't put the hours in, because it just looks like everything makes sense. You said about the shadow steps at the start there. He was willing to burn those. He knew he could. He knew he had it set up correctly. That takes a lot of time and practice to get into that position with any deck.
Yeah, it really does, and you can run the numbers with the deck quite easily. That's one of the easy parts to figure out is, how much spell damage do I actually need against any given deck? And of course, if you're doing 6 times 4, it can be easy to think, well, that's only 24 damage, that's not enough damage. But then you account for the 2 Garots going into the deck at the first place, which it's easy to forget deal a significant amount of damage themselves as they shuffle in. That's the 8 extra damage you need from those 2 4s to push you over the threshold to 32. Where against any deck outside of, Druid, Warrior that are going to gain significant amounts of armor, you don't need all that spell damage. Reserving all of your Shadow Steps and all of your spell damage is a specialist matchup strat for a very narrow range of matchups. So using those steps on field contacts, or in this case, the very unusual option of just Shadow Stepping the spell damage minion back to hand and holding it for 0 mana, essentially just as another 0 mana draw, similar to what we've seen Orange doing before, where he just takes a 1 mana golem, discounts that, and just holds onto it forever as another 0 mana draw in hand, just to make sure he has that field contact juice. Lots of intricacies with this rogue deck, and I'm loving seeing high skill cap decks really hitting the heights here in finals of a major tournament. It's what you want to see.
And talking of high skill cap decks, it's D6 Warlock. Now, I think people have across the board got better with this deck. It's been out for what seems like forever now, although I think we're into week 3 of the expansion, week 4, something like that. It's still a very new deck, but as it's so powerful, a lot of people put the time in. I think he will be okay with this deck, depending on what gets queued into it. I think I'm still looking forward to seeing how that Shaman that you talked about goes down, but he has got to get it done with a D6, and he did look... Shaky's way overstating it, but he looked slightly unsteady on it in his previous match.
He did miss a play out of the advanced D6 rulebook, I shall say. I know you and Raven were commentating that, and I was typing from the peanut gallery in Discord, pointing stuff out. He missed quite a lot of card draw on his turn where he did pop off. The game was won. It didn't really matter, but I think there was a very high lethal out on the turn that he went for. And it's the thing people often miss is that people want to play their Tams in as soon as possible, whereas sometimes it's correct to get more mana back with your Dark Glares before you actually end up putting the Tams in on board, because that can enable you to do more on the same turn. More on the same turn?
I'm sorry, it could be that.
But I think overall his top-down strategy with the deck, understanding how to engineer himself into that position, was very good, and his overall sequencing on the Stealer turn was very good overall. It just kind of fell at the final hurdle a little bit, but it was more than enough to win the game. So we'll see how. Yeah,
there was a play he made in the game before that. I believe it was the game before, where he left himself on 10 cards and discarded a hand of Gul'dan to make things difficult for himself as well. So. Okay. There's just a touch there, if I've remembered correctly, which, is possible sometimes, even at my age. Better hand this time here for AyRoK. He's got the flow, he's got some card draw. It's still not an ideal hand by any stretch of the imagination, but at least he's got things to do in this game. Why is he?
You want to talk about better hands, though? Look over the other side of the board. Coin weapon weapon into free admission, I should say. This is the absolute nuts. And if he doesn't even need the Stealer and Nightshade pair, he just needs a Stealer, because he also has the Backfire in hand to support that as well. This is about as good a hand as you can get.
Right, let's see if he hits. Of course he hits.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, I mean, I've said this hand is good for my butt, but it's not great. It's just better than the previous one. He seems to be loading up on the frost spells and not much else.
No, very true.
I wonder if he's tempted to take the Guild Trader and just trade it away here, but maybe that's just too awful.
I Amazing that a hand that's hit double flow can actually look slow for AyRoK, but it certainly can. And now with these discounts, everything comes down this turn. Dark Glare for 2, Stealer for 1, Backfire for 2. Pop-off number 1 begins. And now against Mage, this is a little tricky, because if you don't think you're going to get there all the way, you do have to mitigate damage to an extent. But as far as the first 3 cards go, Demonic Assault, which is the most single damage in a single card that you can pick up if you shoot yourself in the face with it, and the second Backfire is about as close to perfect as you can get. As long as he gets these sequences right, which so far it looks like he's doing perfectly. After this Backfire, he will look for a cheap card to be able to proc number 7, I believe. After the Backfire deals the extra damage, that puts him to 6 out of 7. Yep, I think he caught himself at the end there. He was about to spend way too much mana on a Demonic Assault, but diverts instead to the School Spirits. So he is doing this very nicely. But since he now has the second Stealer of Souls in hand, the world is his oyster. He can stop basically any time he wants after he gets Tamsin in his hand, because he has that second Stealer guaranteed locked up for the next turn. So we'll see how far he goes with this.
Well, the Mortal Coil there shows he is bailing out anyway. Well, bailing out is not the right word. Setting up for next turn. I think it's a better way of wording it. And he has managed to stop on a 15. Which seems like a sensible sort of number. I haven't mathed it, but it feels like a safe number to me. And it looks like he's going to be good to go next turn.
Yes, indeed. Fire Sale coming down. To at least clear up most of the board. Brain Freeze dropping. Finally, AyRoK is actually getting some of the quest procs he needs, but it's way, 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 way too late here. This is the kind of turn where you're hoping against hope that there's a possible combination of 7 cards in your opponent's hand that don't beat you here, but...
What, like the way he got into the final, you mean?
Yes, exactly like that, but Lightning is not going to strike twice on this occasion, because the Blood Mana Stealer of Souls is all that jiuqianyu is going to need here. Double Unstable Bolt as well means so much damage is going to come through.
And I think it's still quite rare to see D6 go off this early and get it done on turn 6. I know the meme is it always goes off on turn 5, but it's just not the reality of the situation. The reality is that this is a pretty quick completion here.
Yeah, and there you see the reaction to the Blood Mana Stealer coming down. The 1 health minion left up as well is going to give max value to these unstable Shadow Bolts, that they deal 7 damage, or at least the first one does. Taps into hand. That's 6 damage plus 3 more card draws. AyRoK can pack it up. This, Neil, might be the single fastest grand finals in competitive history in Hearthstone.
Yeah, and about 2 hours ago, we were looking forward to seeing Judgment in the final, and then the comeback began. He's been doing this all day long from 2-0 down. I don't know if he has or not. I only know that one. But AyRoK is not out of this yet. The Shaman is still the weak link here, so anything could still happen. But yes, it's 2-0, and it could be the fastest final. I just feel that it's not going to be.
Yeah, blink and you will miss it, everyone, because this one is going past in a heartbeat, and I'm sure a heartbeat is a very short period of time for AyRoK right now, because his heart will be beating out of his chest, having gone through the emotional roller coaster that he has. I think jiuqianyu has had a little bit more time to just reflect, calm down, come into this on a very even kilter, having won his semi-final earlier and having not done it in quite as spectacular a fashion as AyRoK did. And now after hitting that incredible high, he hits the lowest of lows as he just gets body bagged in the first 2 games of this series. Like, these were not close.
Yeah, and I'm going to do something very briefly, and I won't touch on it for long, that I have not done in many years, but I wonder if they both randomise their roles or not, because queuing up the mage is trying to hit the shaman, and not queuing up the shaman is avoiding the mage, and that's all I'm going to say. If it wasn't RNG, he's been out-queued.
And you're getting
moving swiftly on.
You're getting nothing from me on that one.
I know. I didn't give TG anything when he went there.
5 years not engaging with this conversation, and I'm not starting now.
I don't want you to engage. I just wondered because of the way it looks. Okay, Quest Shaman, forced queue now. This is the important part. And I would thoroughly expect to see the Hunter go last into these two. The other 2 matchups are actually pretty good indeed for AyRoK.
Yes, yeah, AyRoK outside of the Hunter does have his Mage and his Handlock. Both winnable matchups for the Shaman. Shaman, the king of 49%. As we've been saying throughout the tournament, it can win anything through the card Lightning Bloom. All things are possible, but if you were to be queuing into either of those matchups on ladder, anytime you see the Warlock portrait as Shaman, you're sad, no matter what matchup it is on the other side. Mage just has a little bit too much time between a couple of freezes, one good fire sale mopping up. They generally have the time to get there. You know, it's Shaman's not a deck that will be doing what both of these decks have done to AyRoK so far, and that's punished a little bit of meandering on his side with a very fast combo kill. Shaman needs to build up, it needs to reach the event horizon of its deck and then start making these unbeatable boards or huge burst damage from hand, but the burst damage is a little bit rarer than just the big boards, so both of these decks normally have a little bit of time to get across here. So he's got some favourables, he's got some room to work with, but I mean, on paper, yes, each of these matchups is going to be favoured up until the Face Hunter, but we're not playing the game on paper, Lorinda.
We are not playing the game on paper. You steal all the best lines from me, obviously, because I've never heard that anywhere before outside of me. Nice start here, though, for jiuqianyu. He's going to be able to have a pop-off turn of some sort with the 3 cards you see. Completing the first part of the quest and developing some board cheaply. However,
I have noticed that the Chinese players are greedy boys with their Lightning Blooms, and I was just about to say, I, personally, from my way of playing the deck, would be surprised to not see Lightning Bloom played this turn. Knowing I'm watching a Chinese player playing Quest Shaman, I am not surprised. Because this is how they've played it the whole tournament. Those blooms are for rushing out Brew Khan. That's what they've been used for consistently. Not in the sense of completing quest, using it as an overload card early, using it to cheat mana on a turn where you can actually play or abuse the 7/7 body or its effect. That's what all the Chinese players have done that we've seen on stream this entire tournament.
I'd noticed it once or twice. I hadn't made the connection that you have. And yeah, that's a thing that has been happening. Now you've pointed it out, you're definitely right. Which is very, very interesting. I wonder if other people will pick up on that. Because they've been doing very well with this deck compared to most people as well, from what I can pick up. And again, that's not an official stat. I haven't statted it, but I think it's probably correct. AyRoK's got real cards this time around, though.
If it comes from the mouth of the stat god himself, it's fact. That's just how it works, whether you've checked it or not.
But my coffee, though. Right. Yeah, it's goodness knows what time in the morning. Yes, I've had a coffee today. Runic Carvings. An interesting one, to say the least, but it does put on the pressure. It forces a fire sale, which in turn forces time and mana. Yes, it's been dealt with, but yeah, that's another tick towards the Shaman getting the quest completed and getting into the game, because he's got no minions. We have seen people just go minion, minion, minion somehow with the Shaman and beat people up. He's chosen to withhold the Feral Spirits, and everything else has just been spell, spell, spell. He's had to do some very creative playing just to keep this going so far.
Yeah, and he did use the Bloom on the previous turn after me pointing out that generally they've been held onto, but I think he recognised that his hand was just not really doing enough in terms of pressure if he did not commit it there. Went for the Gambit with the Treants, got a huge amount of mana unlocked, of course, with the first step of the quest. And now he is just going back to a more standard curve developing with the Feral Spirits. But this is the time of the game where Shaman gets very awkward because so many of your cards cost 3. As you start going through this 5, 6, 7 mana turns, it's very hard to spend all your mana effectively because playing... if you follow Wheater on Twitter, that won't be the first time you've seen someone hold up one finger in frustration to the camera during a high-profile tournament game. AyRoK stakes a little higher than mine were, but still, the frustration of that one thief being drawn off the spring water there, as he was pointing out, there's only one left in the deck, as he already had one in the hand, but that's just an absolutely miserable spot to be in now.
Yep, and he is starting to run out of cards. I've been counting, how he's doing on card draw all 3 of these matches, all 3 of these games, sorry, because it's so crucial. He has got decent quest completions available to him, of course, but if that Arcane Intellect whiffs, then he could actually find himself in a spot here. Although I still think he's in a better position because jiuqianyu has also had an absolute nightmare of a hand this game. When you're trying to get the tempo going, it's just not happened for him.
It hasn't, yeah, and I did get cut off with my point from the spring water, of course, whiffing very, very hard, but these are the awkward turns because, as I was saying, on turn 5, it's very rare that you spend all your mana because you have so many 3-mana cards. You can't Feral Spirit's Portal, it just costs too much, so you generally end up playing one Overload card on turn 5. Well then, guess what? You can't play 2 3-mana cards on turn 6 either because you've just overloaded on the previous turn. So these mid-game turns are by far the trickiest for Shaman overall. AyRoK picking up second flow, getting the gasp from Lorinda.
Still love the way that the Europe cast is just go, yeah, just ignore the fact he's got his second flow on turn 5 or 6. Like, TJ and I don't see a flow in the whole week when we watch people play Mage. And you just go, yeah, 2 flows. I'm not even going to acknowledge it.
It's just how the deck works. Imagine how bad I think this deck is that I still think Mage is not a good deck, and I assume that each player draws double flow every single game because I'm a Europe GM caster.
Fair point. Well made. It does pick up that second Spring Water. This one won't hit a minion, or I would be very surprised.
Yeah, and turbo quest completion as well. Considering he, burned a little bit of mana on that first Spring Water, as you were alluding to, getting Arcanist in hand on turn 6, ready to play on turn 7 with a 0-mana cram session. Hard to complain too much about how this game has been going, I would say, for AyRoK.
Yeah, absolutely, and just nothing doing on the other side. So he's got 2 turns here to win this game. And where he's sat, of course, he's got to be a little bit careful.
Whoa.
Things aren't quite so obvious if that's double lightning bolt in hand. I think we've seen a lightning bolt, but if that's double damage spell in hand, he could be taking a lot of damage with this Alakia coming in as well.
Drops the biscuit, picks up the mana again with the spring water. He knows this time it's guaranteed. No one-off one thief left in there to mess him up. Now with the refreshed mana, he can drop the Arcanist, and now he still has that cram session. He still has the extra mana to come from the mana biscuit as well. This is a very nice little bit of sequencing from AyRoK, just to transfer this extra mana until after he's played the spring water.
It amazes me how he gets so emotive about everything that happens, but doesn't start botching things horribly because of it.
Well, he did kind of botch that because he started throwing a few burn spells before he got the spell damage on board, which is what he was getting frustrated around in the first place. But still, I think he's got more than enough in his locker to be able to get this one done. The only thing he is a little bit low on is time, as this rope burns out. With still an entire cram session left to throw out here.
Yeah, not impressed with himself. I'd love him to get back into Grandmasters. I've got to admit my bias here. He's such a character.
Yeah,
gets it done.
Wears his heart on his sleeve, absolutely. I said earlier this tournament, talking about Orange, that there's 3 moments that stand in my mind that are the most emotional in the generic sense of emotion. They were all different emotions during my casting career. One was Lion winning the World Championship, which is the biggest moment we've had in Hearthstone by far, I would say, one of the biggest moments in competitive gaming in general. The second was Orange being relegated from Grandmasters, and then the third is the moment when AyRoK actually just broke down into tears on stream because he felt himself getting relegated. I don't want to draw too much attention to it because I'm sure it's not a moment that he likes to relive, but it's just an example again of how much he wears his emotions out for everyone to see them, and just an indication of how much it means to him to be at that top level, how much he loves playing Hearthstone at the top level of competition. And he's right up against it in this series, but he is not out of it yet. That is favourable number 1 ticked off for AyRoK. Moving on now to favourable number 2 with the handlock. But the main event, even if he gets through this one, the final boss of the gauntlet still has to be the Face Hunter.
Yeah, and who would you say is favoured in that? It's close, right? That particular matchup, the Hunter and the Shaman. I think the Hunter is probably favoured, personally, before I ask you who knows better than me. But, yeah, I'm curious what you have to say on it.
I would take the Shaman there on most occasions. I think I think Canal Slogger is just too big of a card to deal with in a lot of situations. It depends on lists. Some people are cutting Primal Dungeoneers. Some people run lists that aren't weighted heavily enough in favor of nature spells to really justify that. Some people go down to a single copy. But if you're playing against a double Dungeoneer list, then obviously the ratio of games where they draw Canal Slogger goes through the roof, and that's a brutal card to deal with. We saw that exactly from AyRoK in a previous series, right, where it was the cycle of an overdraft going into the deck, and then exactly Canal Slogger coming back out for the brutal hard beat on the Canal Slogger on the other side. So it's a tough one for me for the Hunter, but it's not one of the most one-sided aggro versus Shaman matchups I will give you, because Hunter has so much game from off-board that other aggro decks don't, right? So if they lose the board, it's not the end of the world.
But first, he does have to actually get it done with a handlock. It's all like saying it's a massively favoured matchup, which it is, but you can lose massively favoured matchups. That's why we play the game, and it's not just on paper, Sottle.
It is indeed.
Or something.
Yeah, who else said that, Reese? Weird, I'm sure I heard that somewhere before. But he is going to be going with the Neophyte on curve. It does deny a ton of options. I was just talking about how many cards cost 3 mana in Shaman. AyRoK decides he wants to shut that down entirely. He does then curve into the backfire. This is, a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other situation, because if you pick up Nulls and a Netheron, you can find yourself being punished a little bit for not having that one card in hand where you've played the Neophyte. However, if you don't hit those cards, you actually get very sticky with hand size on the following turn, because you don't really have any playable cards. Since the Flesh Giant nerf, it's not really playable in that position. But now he can just go with the Life Tap, drop the Anetheron. The only problem here is that Goldshire Null doesn't come down alongside it. He's going to go Null instead, actually, it looks like. Maybe looking at Null Touch here instead, just to be able to swing back on the board. This seems fine.
And then next turn he can still get the 1 mana massive minion down. He's already got a board. That seems okay to me.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Good diversion. I think everyone's eyes light up when they see a Netheron going to 1 mana, right? But I think this was a good little catch here from AyRoK. Playing the Touch also gets a discount tick on the Flesh Giant, increases the opportunity for that tempo swing turn in the coming turns as well. But I spy a Diligent Note Taker, a Lightning Bloom in hand right now for jiuqianyu. So he has a big tempo turn of his own coming up soon.
Yeah, jiuqianyu actually finally slowed down on this turn. He started getting quick again. At the start of this particular game, a little bit of maybe seeing the finish line. Long way yet. Whoa.
Gonna play the Flesh Giant for 4. Okay, really milking this Anetheron. It's fine. I mean, he can continue to spend 2 cards a turn, and he's always going to have the option to play the Anetheron. But I would also argue to the contrary, that the Flesh Giant just continues to get cheaper. Maybe the fear of the 3 damage minion on the other side meant playing a 6 health minion was scary, because Shaman removal deals in 3s almost exclusively with Lightning Bolt, Portal, and Perpetual Flame. So he just wants the base now to land, and I can respect that.
Yeah, and 8/8 is so hard to deal with as well. Like you talk about the 3s, obviously alluding to the fact that 8/6 is easy to deal with, but by the same note, 8/8s are just a nightmare to deal with. You've got to do 9 to it with 3 cards. In theory, again, obviously there's other things that can happen with sloggers and so on, but oof.
Yeah, certainly where your boy Canal Slogger can start to come into play. This is always a dangerous line to walk, I would say, because walling out the 8 health minion is always a little bit sketchy because of the threat of Soul Rend on the other side. Moonfang!
Yeah!
Oh boy.
That was my intake.
Is a 5-drop.
That is indeed a 5-drop. It takes so many resources to get rid of, to the point that I'm constantly surprised it's not in decks.
And there is a super disciplined trade as well from jiuqianyu as he throws his 3/6 into the 8/8 giant to make it an 8/5, and that is with a singular thing on the mind, and that is Soul Rend. I was just about to make the point that trying to play taunts and leave up a giant is generally a bad idea because they can just blast it all away with Soul Rend. The Moonfang was one level of protection against that, but jiuqianyu took it all the way and threw the minion into it as well, which means Soul Rend cannot be cast here. This is a dynamic that if you've played against Hanlock way back in the day, you will be very familiar with, because it was extremely similar to how you played around Hellfire back in the day as well.
You didn't want to see how I played that deck back in the day. There were, I don't know, there were cards on the floor by the time I finished. I don't know how many cards a game I was burning, but it was a lot.
Just does it. He's just saying, my hand says go down to 10, and so that is exactly what he's going to do here. Looking like he wants to maybe set up the Blood Mage just to hope that he can get that to be one of the sources of damage into the Moonfang, which does seem reasonable. It's not going to work, as we can see from the hand on the other side, but it's a reasonable idea.
He kind of knows that as well. There's no real better play. The life tap there would have been surplus to requirements. He's forcing his opponent to actually do something this way. But starting, I mean, he's got a lot of resources still, has AyRoK, but he's just starting to have to deal with more and more things every turn. This is getting away from him slightly.
It is. Tamsin's a good pickup, though. Mortal Coil would be the dream here, or really any cheap spell, because he can then use that for the multiple sources of damage that he wants on that Moonfang. Because as it stands right now, playing a 6/6 taunt into this 6/2 Moonfang is really not particularly appealing.
Hey, there's a Null. That's definitely a source of damage that maybe he's going to have to take up.
You are defenders of a doom.
You get accustomed to the smell.
Scavenger, Bristleback, the 6/3, I would imagine. Yeah, he's just giving it to it. Like 6/2 Moonfang into a 6/6 taunt.
Yeah.
This is not the spot you want to be in whatsoever.
He's not panicking, though. It's something I like about what he's doing here. Even though the Moonfang is getting its pick. He's got a lot. AyRoK's got a lot of cards in hand. He's choosing to use them rather than sort of going all in, take down the Moonfang. He's just going, okay, well, that's been rolled. That's on the board. It's going to be a problem. But if I kill everything else, it is only 6 a turn, and my opponent is going to have to sort of trade with it. It will eventually get off the board. Let's just not die in the meantime. We'll try not to.
Shake the head from AyRoK. Soul Rend does clean all this up. That's a good sign, I will say. Raise Dead is the one card that he's really missing, that he would not want to be burning away from the bottom of his deck, but still not finding any removal spells to be going with this Tamsin. Like, a hand with a touch and a Drain Soul in it right now would make a mockery of this board state, but he's just not finding any of it.
I mean, the Soul Rend also empties his deck, which I know is kind of the point to some degree, but oh my goodness.
That's a huge deal. Oh, is he not going to Tamsin with this? I'm a little surprised. Yeah, precise. Like, the thing is, you're playing Coil twice to draw 2 cards for a total of 1 mana, so any Unstable or any Drain Soul that you then find is also playable on that turn.
Right.
You could then take most of this apart, especially if it's unstable. You deal a really nice chunk of damage to yourself, which is quite reasonable in this position because he's running out of ways to do that to actually get his Tamsin active. And he's going to want that Tamsin active before he starts hitting fatigue, ideally.
Yes, ideally indeed. He would actually like to do some damage rather than take it. I love being reductive. It's great.
Well, I mean, I think the words were precise there because you can still get to fatigue and just take the damage you need for your quest from your first few fatigue ticks, right? Like, that is a viable way to do it. It's just less than ideal because you are still under pressure while that is happening.
Well, next turn. Does jiuqianyu actually want to go for 2 charge calls, or is that too slow? That's what he's got on his mind right now.
I think he will, and I think on reflection, that's why the Tamsin has not been used from AyRoK, because that gives him Tamsin, Soul Rend opportunities, which actually gives him a shot of clearing up some board states, especially alongside that Shadow Bolt as well, if you compare that up. So actually, having now looked at it, because he has the information, right? The charge call was note-taken, I believe. That's why it's back in the hands right now. So he has that full information that he knows he has that to deal with. So I actually think this is a pretty smart way of panning it out. I can't believe he has another scavenger in the deck. I thought for sure he was out with them at this point.
jiuqianyu also there, thought long and hard whether to guidance now and have a chance to play something for 2 mana or just to get the double guidance next turn. Wow.
All of it. Get it all in play. And the neophytes. All of it.
Get it all in play and the cards. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you shut down Brukan. You know you shut down Brukan. You know there's a charge call. It seems like double neophyte would be pretty smart right now. Get the rest down, and it's lethal the turn after, incredibly.
The hour is close at hand.
Battle is well and truly engaged now. Both players actually taking the rope quite regularly. So they've both settled into this match, which is good. I'd hate for it to go down to someone just speed running themselves into the ground.
All of it. All of it. Sorry, I'm getting quite aggressive now at this point.
You are, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now he can't play a Battle Master.
I think he's fine. Yeah, this is crucial, right? Double neophyte to give you more actual analysis than just the words all of it. Double neophyte, because of the one overload, meant that Brukan charge call was just not a play this turn because only 9 mana was available. Brukan charge call will cost a total of 10, so the second neophyte pickup was enormous there for AyRoK this turn. And now he's looking very comfortably in control of this situation.
Yet the undercard is nearly over, Sottle, but the main event is still to come in the next game. Couldn't have booked it any better.
Couldn't have booked it any better. And indeed, in our prize fight of the evening, AyRoK Balboa will be going up against. I'd love if it was Brox on the other side, so I could have said Brox Lesnar, but that's just not going to work out in the way that I hoped.
But you've done it anyway. Yeah, you're not going to get another chance. There's no point saving that one for many, many years until obviously the next Masters Tour where it's now bound to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good, Sottle. I'm disappointed to have to admit.
What isn't good though is this turn. jiuqianyu, this is the best he can do, but it's still only 4 AoE. It's still a monstrous amount of damage left up on the board. And where I come from, 12 plus 12 is more than 19. So Battlegrounds Battlemaster is going to square this one up. And if we get an ending to this series more dramatic than we did with Face Hunter last time, Lorinda, you'll never hear me complain about anything ever again because we will have been spoiled this tournament. Don't hold me to that. You definitely will.
I was going to say, we've been spoiled this tournament, and you said something about you weren't going to bully Raven on his birthday and did it anyway. So we know your word's not really very good.
I love complaining. It's literally my favourite thing in the world. I would not give it up for anything. But this is coming down to a climactic moment, a final game. We're right back in the same spot we were before, where AyRoK has a Face Hunter up against the wall. And this is the deck. This is the AyRoK deck. When I characterize players as having particular pet decks, AyRoK has always been an aggro player in my head. But he's been a Face Hunter player in particular. Even in the weeks of GM, where Face Hunter just didn't even really seem to make that much sense, here was AyRoK. Jamming Face Hunter, going face, smashing his finger on the hero power. This is just what he has done throughout the time I've got to know him in his competitive career. And boy, oh boy, there is not a more fitting way to be ending this series and this tournament.
Yeah, I was waiting for you then to do the parallels where China win this and Europe win that. But one of the other facts is that China have won 4 of the last 5 Masters Tours if they win this one. Gabby is sort of the only person to have won since Fnatic won Madrid. Since Fnatic won Montreal, which was before Madrid. So doing this one for everybody who wants to stop China from getting a 4th win out of 5. But seeing them win 4 out of 5 would be unthinkable 2 or 3 years ago. China used to invite the Europeans over and make videos mocking themselves to advertise about how they were going to move. And here they are, destroying everybody nearly every time now.
I mean, they got so used to superstars from Europe coming over and bodying them in China that most Chinese fans' favorite Hearthstone player is Kalento. Like that's just how it went in the region. And they did put on these incredible high-profile tournaments. Of course, Tice has a Ferrari that he loves to show off on stream. Feel free to ask him about it. He'll show you his Ferrari that he won from the Chinese tournament at a moment's notice. This was the story, but China has just got so much better since then. And honestly, it's really the circuit that I put that down to, because they have this grueling mix of open and invitational circuits. They've, kind of gone back to the system that we had even before, like it all switched to tour stops, right? Where there was a mixture of the two, with a largely invitational based team league based with the massive open tournaments. And when I say massive, I mean massive, like China scale massive open tournaments. They have everything you can possibly imagine, and those opens and Chinese, the Chinese server ladder is where a player like jiuqianyu has been cutting his teeth up until this point, and now having this big breakout on the biggest possible stage here over in our scene.
Indeed, and now we're going to get to see this one game. Will it make will it make a difference? Yes, it will make a difference. It will decide the champion, Neil. Well done. But who will get a decent start, and both players will be happy with their opening hands. AyRoK's isn't perfect, but there is a curve there. That's plenty. You accept it. But jiuqianyu's hand is exceptional, looking for the job it has in hand, in my opinion.
Yeah, double one maker is actually pretty gross here, because this neophyte, which AyRoK would love to have used on turn 2 to block coin into 3, that's generally the curve that you want to play as Face Hunter. You play a 1-drop and then you play the neophyte on 2 and shuts down a lot of their options. That's nothing. It's nothing at all, because not only did jiuqianyu very smartly use the coin to play around Neophyte, he has the perfect hand to support it as well. And he's kind of just winning board at this point.
Pack Runner would slow that down to some degree in a lot of worlds, but there is a devolving missiles which might come to a timely use here.
Can't imagine we're not going to see devolving missiles. Only question was whether it was going to be investment opportunity or the novice zapper to go alongside that. He could just essentially take board right now with the novice zapper, but chose not to. Chose to go with the investment opportunity instead. But second pack runner now is a very nice looking pickup for AyRoK. And this is not a straightforward choice either, but he does end up going with the Rhino, which I respect here. I think this is one of the matchups for sure where you're going to have targets for that Rhino to run into.
Both players playing pretty quickly. No point playing the Slogger. He's not taken 6 damage in the first 4 turns against the Hunter.
He's about to, though. That Slogger is about to put in some work, because that's 4. There's 1 more going face from the Tiny Fin. This Slogger is going to have to put some work in, and it's not coming down this turn. Unstable? Not an unstable portal, please. No, absolutely not. Coming down here will do the 4 damage because of the spell damage in play. That is huge to deal with the Rhino, because otherwise that thing was just getting to attack again this turn.
Yeah, he does have a lot of backup in hand now, AyRoK. But yeah, if that thing attacked again, that was probably over. As it is, forced to play the Instructor just as a 3/3 and get a card. Great. Maybe get 2 cards if you're lucky.
Wait, what? Hang on, what's happened? That came from the portal, Neil.
I'm losing it. I am losing it. That's what's happened. Finally gone.
It's the reverse. It was a spell that spawned a random minion, and it just happened to have a sense of irony.
My bad.
Yeah.
Obviously. It's nobody else's bad, is it? Okay, so Pack Runner is what I was looking at when I wasn't paying attention to the top of the board. To delay the Rhino a turn, which allows you to weave in hero powers. I think his hand is too full of things to start weaving things in now, though. I think he wants to spew this on the board if he can.
I think so too. He actually has a weirdly late game Hunter hand with double Rhino Ringling's rifle. So he can afford to go a little bit longer here. It might even be a rifle turn this turn, because that does fit with the hero power. He can just take care of the Zapper here. Even picking up a freezing trap isn't that bad, even though maybe it would set off some alarm bells that you're freezing a Instructor Fireheart back to the hand.
Nah.
That thing costs 5. It's not really going to have a significant impact on this game, you would imagine. Let's see where this attack goes. Straight downtown, of course. Why am I doubting AyRoK? He's a pure Hunter player.
Yep. I was trying to look to see if there was any sort of explosive trap bluff available there, but there wasn't. If you trade in the Murloc, you've got no other minions, so your opponent's kind of forced to go face just to open up the situation where they can go face with other things anyway.
Double slogger! He's going to get to ship a little bit of damage back because of the snakes. The attack did go face first to play around that explosive trap. However, there is still only 2 1-1s in play here to be able to deal with this, and I think this might be an aimed shot to finish out the turn on that 6-3.
Yeah, and then it's going to be interesting to see how many trades he makes, if any.
Agreed. This is interesting because he could now tracking again and use the quick shot if he really wanted to, but I don't see particular merit in doing that. Using the quick shot to draw a card here might just end up being a little more valuable. See what he finds this time. This freezing trap was offered there, but he's not taking it if he's making the trades, I can tell you that much. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see what the other 2 options were.
No, I did not either. I was just checking there weren't any Perpetual Flames hanging about, to be honest, but AyRoK's made that a pretty bad card right now.
Although I may have spoken too soon, because it's a realistic play, I suppose, to play around the second Canal Slogger, right, to clear the board and still play the freezing trap.
I'm ignoring you just for a second. How many cards is going to be drawn here?
Literally all of them?
Yes, this is a real problem now. jiuqianyu right on the edge of being able to win this, but there's some damage.
Gotta be piercing, right? He just needs damage plus damage equals damage. That's about the only combo he's interested in. Ship the 1-1 rush into the Cornelius first. That 1-1 is useless to you. It can't go face, so you might as well cash it into face damage where you can. And now this second Canal Slogger in hand. We've seen one moment where AyRoK crosses his fingers, throws up the prayer hands, and just says, please no healing. But healing is exactly what is in place right now for jiuqianyu. Again, the makeup of exactly what the second secret is a huge deal.
Yeah, it really is. Okay.
It is freezing. Okay. The mage
How much damage does he have even after this healing sort of? There's a lot of damage on this side of the board.
There is also a lightning storm, however, in jiuqianyu's hand. And he can drop... Whoa, he can drop Brew Can, and still the nothing can stop us this turn? You might even be able to set up a realistic counter-lethal.
Yeah, the storm is going to... I don't want to rule it out, but it looks like it would just about seal it up.
Plays the Brucan first. He wants to Lightning Storm and get maximum crystals overloaded because he has the overdraft in his hand on the following turn. As long as he actually has mana to spend next turn, which I'm not 100% convinced about, because I think he did Bloom twice that turn, right? I'm a little bit worried about how much mana he has on the following turn, but we'll find out.
Twice. Lightning Storm twice. I think that's 8, so he should have 1 mana. I think he's got that right.
Demon Companion not getting there. Cannot get this quick shot through right now.
It's grim, isn't it?
Got to get the hero power down, and now we'll see how much mana is available here. Is that legit 0 out of 9? Oh, it's actually 0 out of 9! Oh, that's a disaster! The second Lightning Storm was not the one. I take it all back.
Magical.
That's 1 short. One short.
Oh, how much damage is on the other side now?
Jiuqianyu has 1 turn. He's used all his healing.
7, Nofin adds 2, Lightning Bolt adds 6, so we are at 15. Overdraft will do it with the double overload from the Lightning Bolt. It's going to be exact on the other side. I think this is just going to end it, and I think AyRoK is going to find himself 1 damage off lethal. He can't even bring himself to hit end turn.
He's trying to make your close.
He knows what's in store for him on the other side.
This is a lad who knows how to get his airtime, Sottle.
His best hope here is that I have counted this wrong, but I don't think I have. 6 from Bolt, 9 from the minion, 2 from the overdraft with the overloaded crystals is going to be exact, lethal, and with a slap and a punch to his own head, jiuqianyu is going to be your Masters Tour Silvermoon champion, continuing, as Lorinda was talking about, an incredible streak for the Chinese players, interrupted only briefly by Gabby picking up a win for the European region in a tournament where really the European region had no choice except to win, because the entire top 4 was made of Europe at that point. But this time it is China once again, and what a breed of competitive Hearthstone players they are pumping out over there, Lorinda.
Absolutely, but something you said earlier has just come back here. We have been spoiled this week. What a way to end the tournament. 1 health in a best of 5 difference, and they're the ones where you go back and you watch the replay yourself either never or 1,000 times to work out where you could have got 1 more point of damage. I don't think we saw anything where there's an extra point available, but you either brush it off, and I think AyRoK will. He'll just come back to the next Masters Tour and try and rack up some more points, or you can let it drive you mad and see if you can find 1 point somewhere.
Yeah, I have to say I don't necessarily see it. Maybe the tracking options would be the point of diversion where you could do something a little bit different instead, but I think I agreed with both of them at the time. Even in a spot like that, right, that would be a spot where you could miss 1 damage. He traded the Rush minion into the minion before he then traded with the Rhino, picking up 1 extra damage that he wouldn't have got there elsewhere. So I think he was doing everything that he was doing. If there was 1 damage missed, I did not see it. And in the end, this was a brutal, exact lethal to come back the other way. But that's only if you're looking at it from the perspective of the bottom of the screen. If you're looking at it from the top, this is absolute elation, even though that's not what it may look like in the reaction coming out from jiuqianyu. But once again, we are crowning a Chinese champion of a Masters Tour. And again, this is someone that wants to play at the highest level in all available facets. So if there are teams out there looking for a player, if there's a team league spot open for this boy, then please do snap him up, because you'd have a Masters Tour winner on your roster, and you cannot say fairer than that.
Yeah, he was described as a sort of on the outside looking in. Well, now he's on